We've seen lots of applications this week of some very sophisticated artificial intelligence systems. Now we're linking the financial piece into this. The interesting question that came up in some of our chats, how do you measure the intelligence quotient, the IQ, of one of these AI systems, whatever it's called?
Let's get to that. I want to set that up as sort of a larger question. But let's start with this. Okay, we'll start there, but I want to talk a lot about sort of the opposite side of the problem that Gahl talked about, where we also have problems like what Aptage is facing, which is where we're looking at AI for project management. And in that case, what we don't have is big data sets, we have small data sets. Because beginning a project, you have very little data on how that, if it's a new team doing a new piece of work, you don't really have a lot of data, but you still want to apply analytics to that. And you want to be able to apply analytics to sort of predict what you're doing. And so what we're going to see in the future of analytics is not only harvesting big data sets, and there's going to be huge, I want to talk more about that as well. And then we also are going to have to take, in lots of situations, like for undiagnosed diseases, we actually have very small data sets. And we want to make good decisions. So it's going to, the future of analytics is going to go, we're beginning to see trends in small data all the way up to big data and scaling that. And AI has a real important role in this. So what I was thinking about this question you were asking about, well, how do you, so the example that we had from the gentleman from Google on the program that played Go so well, and it played Go better than anybody ever has in the history of Go, and came up with strategies that are unprecedented historically. And that program worked better than anyone expected and anyone had any right to expect. So the question is why? What is it about? There's something really deep going on that we don't know how to measure, we have no analytics for, we have no way of predicting. If you look at the AI techniques, they're very ad hoc right now. You just try out stuff, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they work a whole lot better than we expect. So it raises the question you asked, which is how would you measure the IQ of an AI system? And right now, we don't even know how to measure the IQ of a person. And on the other hand, if we're going to build AI systems, we want to know which one is better than another. We need some way of knowing that. And we need some way of knowing in advance which techniques are more likely to work for which problems. And right now, we just have lots of interesting case studies, and if you look at the challenges and the experiments, they're all very interesting. But we have no theoretical basis for that. So I really think that part of the future of analytics is solving this problem. And we're really looking for, I mean, we're just at the leading edge of that right now.
Yeah. Maybe I can add to that. I think that analytics is, data science is a unique field where the state of practice in industry is ahead of academia. You know, if you look at traditionally how we do engineering, we have mechanical engineering, and then we'll have like mechanical engineering faculty, and we'll have, you know, publication going back, 200 years about the foundation and how it's all built, and it's a very rigorous field, and many of the fields of engineering are like that. When you look at data science, we don't really have that. What we have is much more of a art and practice that in many cases in industry is actually, like I said, far ahead of what we have in academia. And I think that is just a response to the business need and business opportunity. And I think that is really also, I agree with what Murray is saying. And I think that really is the big challenge that I see. How do we get academia to play the same role in data science that it's playing in other engineering and practice industries? And I think until we get that, we're really not going to solve the problem that you raised.
Thank you for that. In all the sessions that I attended this week, subject of risk came up, whether it's risk of health crisis, energy crisis, water crisis, air crisis, financial crisis. What does your science have to offer for us who are worried about risk mitigation, and so forth?
Well, okay. So there's really two ways. There's risk analysis and risk management. There's actually remarkably different disciplines in the world. And risk management is what most people are taught, and it says what you do is you sit around and think about all the bad things that might happen, and you work up mitigation plans just in case. People work up these risk management plans and then ignore them. Risk analysis is understanding what is the likelihood of you not succeeding at a goal that you want to meet, or what is the likelihood of some catastrophic event happening. And that's applied probability. And what we're finding right now in risk analysis, so let's take an example like this Equifax thing. Okay. Nobody said, what is the probability, if you would, looking back, you would say that what is the probability of that event happening was remarkably high. Right? It could have been seen in advance. Nobody was planning for it. And in fact, if you were to think about this from the point of actuarial sciences and insurance, and if we were to make companies like Equifax actually liable for the outcomes of these events, what we would be developing is a true risk analysis of the economic impact of these kind of events. And what's further is, if you look at the Internet of Things and all these things we've been talking about how connected the world is, and how now we have systems of systems of systems of systems that are interacting in unpredictable ways. What we need is a much deeper science on understanding what are the likelihood of these bad outcomes. I mean, there was this awful flash trading thing that happened a few years ago, where the whole stock market went haywire once. Now they didn't see that coming, but the system theory people would have predicted it. So what I think is going to start happening is we're going to start looking at new kinds of analytics for understanding how these systems, what are the likely events, what is the unlikely events, but possible events for interacting of big systems, and start planning for that. That's one thing. I'll stop here and let Gahl step in, but I have some other thoughts.
So the perspective I wanted to add is, when you look at risk management and risk analysis, there's a spectrum, right? On the one hand, there is, what am I going to do about the possibility of a flood in my area, right? That's like a highly rare event of great impact to, let's say, my company. The other is, should I give you a loan or not? Okay, which let's say, give, tens of thousands of loans a month, right? So we've got these like rare events, and we've got these transactional events, and I think that where big data and analytics is coming in is it's kind of working its way up the spectrum. So when you think about the transactional, it's all about personalization, using the data to personalize, and that's really nothing new. When you think about the credit score, that's really an example of a personalization that, the business opportunity for it was so great, it revolutionized the credit industry, and that's been going on for decades. But now we're seeing that kind of personalized scoring happening in many industries. Auto insurance, for example, we're debating whether we'll let it happen in health or not, and all the moral implications of that. And I think that what you're seeing is that there's a kind of moving further up into more complex and rare event modeling. So I think there's somewhat of a continuum there to think about.
So can I follow up on that? Sure. So let's take the, we agree on almost everything.
Yes.
So, but I want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
So let's take the flood event that you brought up. So we all know, we have this problem in Boston right now, which we know we're at sea level for much of our important infrastructure, or like 10 feet above sea level, something like that. We're building out the whole seaport area with the high-tech area right at sea level. It's a scary thing. And we know the sea levels are going to rise. Okay? So the question is, how much should we build a seawall? And how much should we spend to forestall what we sort of know is many models say is going to happen. So it becomes now an interesting economics analysis question about, and another example is how much should flood insurance cost? In the old days, when they would think about whether floods are going to happen, they'd say, this area, this floodplain, you have one flood every 100 years. And you find that now we're getting 5 floods in that area because we don't have weather isn't a stationary process. So the analytics, old frequency-based analytics about setting insurance rates has to change. This is a practice thing. And second, we got to start thinking about not only is this, what are we going to do, but how much are we going to spend in order to forestall these, the effects of the changing environment around us. And that's also, so I'm willing to bet without knowing anything, they're not teaching this at the actuarial science schools yet. And this comes back to your academia being behind what the industry needs.
A common theme this week has been looking for things that we don't know what we're looking for. The whole hidden truth that's out there. Where do you guys see that heading, and are we gaining on it?
Yeah. I think that when you look at it, the way analytics is practiced in industry, we typically, the bulk of the effort is focused around identifying solutions, prescriptions to known problems. And I think that, at least from my experience in industry, this thing about let's explore the data in an open-ended way, that I don't see a lot of that. What I see a lot is that you typically have something you're trying to decide about, like you're going to give this person a loan. What is, what from the point of view of financial wellness, what should be the next thing that they would do? There's typically a lot more business focus, and it sounds great about exploring the data, but if you don't have a guiding principle, it's hard to really get to have a focus, because there is so much of it. There's so many things you can do. So that's my experience.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads to my next question, which I love to ask panelists here. Is everything invented yet? And I understand that it's not, but is enough invented so that we could find lots of different applications across the spectrum, and meanwhile waiting for academia to catch up and your companies to catch up and so forth?
Well, let's start there. There's theory and practice. And my example of the AI thing is that has not been invented yet. We don't have the theory for measuring the IQ of an AI system. But there's a lot of theory that has been invented but hasn't been applied. So, for example, Larry Smart talked about this in his panel, Dr. Hood talked about this. The analytics that we're applying to medicine is just, I'm going to use the word wrong. And we're now learning how to, but there are analytic techniques which people are now exploring and are available to be applied to medicine. So the idea that if you were to look, if you were to look at this personalized medicine, where you look at a person as a set of systems that are interacting, the biome, the metabolites, the what's neurochemistry of metabolism, not only metabolism, but blood chemistry, all these things that are interacting with each other. And systems have systemic behavior. They're either in stable equilibrium or in some sort of stable periodicity or in some sort of chaotic state. We've known this for years. Actually, Gahl and I both studied this in graduate school. And the thing is, if we can understand the state of the system and the disease state isn't whether you're off the normal values on things, it's whether your system is in some sort of unhealthy state that needs to be put back to a healthy state, how these systems are interacting. We have math for that. It's not being applied. It's simple as that.
So let me give you my perspective on that. I think that we are just at the beginning of a golden age of invention that I think we've never seen anything like it, and let me explain why. If you look at inventions happen as a result of convergence, right? And if you look at the convergence that we have today, we have the ability to aggregate huge amounts of data that is unprecedented in the history of humanity, and I'm talking about like exponential compared to anything we've had before. if you look at our compute capacity from the point of view of, we heard several speakers talk about all the custom hardware that's happening. If you look at changes in consumer behavior, which is really important. People expect personalized experiences. They don't want to be advertised to. They're focused on wellness. That's a huge shift, a lot of values-based in the current rising generations. That's a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, and I have a lot of examples for that we could share compared to what we had in the past. And if you take those three things together, okay, there's bound to be infinite invention coming out because the opportunities are so great to disrupt so many industries that and I'm living part of it, that we've barely seen anything in my mind. I think we're just at the beginning.
Let me make a quick comment, and then Murray, I'd like your follow-up on that one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people came into this conference kind of negative, all the bad news kind of stuff. And I noticed the tone of the whole crowd, everybody I talked to at the breaks and so forth, starting to feel kind of optimistic. And what you just said really does light that kind of a fire. Murray, what do you see here to make us, that we should be optimistic rather than pessimistic?
Reinforce what Gahl said. I think it is so exciting where we are in terms of just the beginnings of what we're now going to do with the next generation of computing methodologies. And for example, there's this whole, somebody talked about this hypercomputing things where we're going to get 5 more orders of magnitude of compute power. The kind of things that I'm talking about in terms of understanding how systems are going to require that. But we're going to have it. And the other thing for me to be more fair about things, one of the reasons that the statistics that people were using were so poor is because that was the best they could do with the tools that were available. And now we have, as Gahl says, we have the opportunity now to do much more sophisticated things. And so that what we need now, though, is for as you said, the academia has to catch up with us, not the other way around. Medicine has to catch up with us. Actuarial science has to catch up with us. The whole data science is not being done at the universities. And this is really exciting.
So that we leave time for some questions, I'd like to give each of you a minute to make a statement that I didn't think about asking or to follow up on any of these kinds of things, and then we'll get the audience 5 minutes so that they can get their 2 cents in.
I guess I'll just echo what I said before. I think FiRe is a great forum because people come here open, actually, to thinking about what is the next thing, and I think that the next 10, 15 years are going to knock it out of the park.
Thank you. Great. Murray?
Actually, I have nothing any smarter than what Gahl just said. What I found really exciting here is the convergence, as you were saying, between the new compute architectures, the crossing the chasm or something of AI, where AI is no longer is now looking like it's really going to be something that's going to make a huge difference in all kinds of places, and the refocusing on visualization. There was a study, I think it was in the 80s, that NSF did on pointing out how important data visualization was for human beings to actually understand what's going on from the numbers. So what's old is new again. But the fact is that what we're going to do with AI is augment people's ability to see what's going on through these visualization techniques. And so it's not going to be people versus machines. It's going to be people and machines. And we really are on the cusp of this happening. And this is what I learned at FiRe. And I'm equally excited.
People in the loop, like Larry Smarr's story here with the doctor, and have that laptop computer real time informing a surgical procedures.
Walking through his intestines.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, we got 5 minutes. Do I
Yes.
see somebody over
Hi.
there?
I hear your message that academia needs to catch up with what you're doing in industry. But what do you think the barriers are to academics actually participating in the level that you think that needs to happen? I know being an academic myself, within the academic institution, there's issues surrounding grant funding, connecting with people outside the academic institutions, and so on. So what do you see as those obstacles?
Yeah, I'll take that. So I think you highlighted all the traditional obstacles. I think that in this case, there are two additional obstacles. The first is companies really don't want to part with their data, right? So both, in my roles at Ford and at General Motors and now at Acorns, people come and ask us for data, and we don't really have an incentive to give the data. And there's two aspects to it. The first aspect is the companies are protective of the data, but then when they look at what's on the other side, they don't see anything that exciting, right? Because they see their internal practices actually more advanced than the person coming to them asking for the data. So that value equation is not even there. So I think that until we see the progress, unfortunately, that's kind of sad news.
So would it be actually to challenge that perspective that academics need to catch up? Perhaps it's industry that needs to actually reach out rather than the other way around.
So for example, when I was at General Motors, I had several collaborations, and the way I did it is I brought interns in, and that's actually a model that's a lot more common in Europe. But the interns, they did real projects with the advice of the faculty. They presented it internally. We have ways to abstract the academic scientific results without actually revealing the data, and they get their papers published. So I think that it's especially, I think, for U.S. universities where the faculty is judged by the amount of money they bring in. In this area, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because that's just the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman over here.
Hi, guys. John Thompson.
It was you, John.
Hi, Robert. How you doing? Gahl, good to see you again.
Yes.
Obviously, analytics is just starting out. I keep my grandfather's slide rule on my desk to remind me where we came from. And I do think we are going in a great direction. And in my recent book, I said that I think we're about 80 years away from inventing all the things that we can do with data and analytics. So there's a lot of room for optimism in the field. I like your comment, Murray, about small data. I think we've seen a great bias recently with deep learning, neural nets, machine learning, biasing towards large data sets. One of the things that I see as a real issue that will be solved, and we will solve it, is data pipelines that you were just talking about.
Yes.
Bringing in open source data, bringing in governmental data, bringing in internal data, and using it together. And I hate the word mashup, but I guess that's something everybody understands. So we'll bring the data sets together in an easier way so we can do analytics against it. So do you see data pipelining, data factories as something that you need to focus on?
Murray?
First of all, I have my own slide rule on my desk. Just say.
I was too young to buy one.
Yeah,
so.
well, enough of that. But the answer is it's a wonderful comment. In fact, I'm working with, as you know, I don't know if you know, but Hail Life is an example. One of the things that and also Dr. Kolinsky in his work, what we've understand is if you look at the medical data, it's very heterogeneous. And we want to stage it in order to apply the analytics. And there's no real data exchange standards.
None.
And there needs to be. So we're already coming together in industry, again, to start solving that problem.
Yeah.
So the answer is you're right on, and yes, that's going to be, and yes, because that's what needs to be solved, it's going to get solved. And maybe we'll get academic partnerships, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
But the problem is exactly what you're describing.
I think one of the big issues that we've had over the last 30 years is we've spent so much time structuring and building data warehouses and things that added almost no value to the environment. Now we're getting around to a data science approach where the data pipelining and the data management happens just before the analyses. So why spend all these billions of dollars to build, architectures that aren't really that valuable? They're not flexible enough to move in the direction that we need to Gahl's point, that this idea that we're just going to muck around and investigate the data, that's not really going to get us much value. You really need to have an objective and a focus that you're going after the data, and you need a flexible data management approach to go after the small data, the mashup, and the large data to do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We got to declare this over. Thank you, gentlemen, for
Thank you,
sharing your
sir.
expertise with us. Wonderful, wonderful session.
Thank you.
you.